Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Associations of Graduates and Air Force Academy Foundation special presentation. I'm Liz Diss, and I'm going to be your host for today's panel. I'm a 2006 graduate and a talent acquisition and business development professional who's been in the HR world since my exit from the military in 2011. This evening, I'm excited to announce I'll be joined by three panelists who will share their journeys into becoming FBI agents. I'm honored to introduce Mr. Dean Phillips, class of 1988, who is currently serving as the Assistant Director for the IT Infrastructure Division. Mr. Michael Bergner, class of 1993, a supervisory special agent in the Denver field office. And Mr. Charles Jones, class of 1995, who is currently assigned as a special supervisor for the Denver field office. We'd like to move into some questions, starting our panel. For the first go around, I would like to ask that each participant please tell me about their time at the Air Force Academy and what they majored in. I'd like to start with Dean Phillips. Would you please tell me what your major was and what your plan was when it was time to graduate?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So when I was at the academy, I really enjoyed math and science classes, but I found as I was approaching the time to declare a major, I couldn't decide. I was in the middle of a poli-sci class that I really enjoyed, and I decided to go political science. And so, I went political science with an emphasis in international relations. I thought at the time that I was going to fly, and my major didn't matter that much. So that's how I ended up in political science. It turned out to be a great selection. It helped me build communications skills and really understand, kind of the politics of the world and things like that. So it's a good choice.
Dean, would you mind sharing what your AFSC ultimately ended up being, please?
Sure. Yeah, I ended up being an OSI agent, Air Force OSI, upon graduation. I did that for about 10 years active duty, and then came over to the FBI from OSI.
Fascinating. Mike, would you mind sharing the same, what your degree was in, as well as what your AFSC was upon exit?
Sure. Like most academy graduates, had plenty of math and science force fed, and when I had the opportunity to choose a major, I knew I wasn't going to fly because I wasn't pilot qualified, and so my sights went to the intelligence career field, and I got interested in the geography major and learning about people and places. Figured that would suit me well and gave me a break from the constant stream of other content that was coming at us. So when I graduated, I went into the Intel career field, was in Intel operations, worked in the NSA ground station for a number of years overseas, and then work in the U2 program, doing the imagery and the ELINT and SIGINT part from the airborne platform.
Fantastic. Charlie, would you mind sharing the same? What you graduated with regards to degree from the Air Force Academy?
Sure. I took a little longer route. I'm actually a prep school grad as well. I wasn't as smart as Mike and Dean and got directly into the academy, so I went an extra year at the prep school. I played football both at the prep school and then my freshman and sophomore years at the Air Force Academy. I wanted to do human factors engineering initially at the academy. Like Dean, I thought I was going to fly, so I wasn't super worried about it. And there was a relatively new degree at that time called management, which is essentially, I don't think the Air Force wants to say they have business degrees, but essentially it's a business degree. I switched my degree to that program and graduated with a management degree with a little bit of emphasis on marketing. Ultimately, I ended up not flying during my graduation period. There were lots of cutbacks on pilot slots. And instead of flying, I actually went into the ground, and I was a 13 Sierra missileer in space and missiles for my assignment. First assignment, missiles in F.E. Warren Air Force Base here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And then I did some overseas satellite stuff over in Germany for a few years prior to my entry into the FBI.
Fantastic. And what we're learning here today is ultimately that background of a varying degree can still enter into the FBI. And with that next question, I'd like to turn it back over to Dean to ask Dean, would you mind sharing what the mission of the FBI is?
Yeah, Liz, I think, I don't know if it's the reception I have here or your mic, but I'm breaking up a lot. I thought I heard you ask about the mission of the FBI, so I'm gonna go with that. Okay. All right. Yeah, the mission of the FBI is effectively to protect the American people, the American citizens, and defend the Constitution of the United States. I mean, it's pretty simple. We are a law enforcement and intel community member, so we are we fill sort of both niche roles in that sense. Very unique among some of the federal agencies.
Fantastic, and I'm hoping that I'm coming in more clear now. My next question is, with regards to Charlie, would you mind answering the question, what made you want to apply for the FBI? What was your draw?
Okay. Actually, I absolutely loved the Air Force. I still love the Air Force. Um, I was stationed here. I'm actually currently assigned as a supervisor for the state of Wyoming, and I sit in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I actually fought to get this desk because of my time in the Air Force when I was at FE Warren, and I really fell in love with this location. But while I was a missileer here, I had some protesters break onto one of my missile sites, and it ended up being an FBI investigation into the damaging of government property. And the case agent at the time was Rich Price out of Denver Division, and I was one of the key witnesses in that investigation, testifying on behalf of the FBI on had these people actually damaged our resources, what that value would be, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point, the FBI started recruiting me. The FBI loves to recruit from military academies and military in general because, I mean, we have a wonderful background, stable, reputable individuals, and they started recruiting me initially. Then I went ahead, I stayed in the Air Force. I did apply, and there was a hiring freeze at the time. While I was in Germany doing the satellite stuff, 9/11 happened, and literally floodgates began to open up for FBI agents. They were in dire need. So all of us that were in the pipeline kind of got pushed through. So that's kind of how I even had any interest in the FBI to begin with, is the FBI came to me on a fluke incident while I was in the Air Force.
Fantastic, very interesting. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next question, which is, what would you tell someone, a person that is getting ready to transition out of the military? What would you tell them about the process in terms of getting into the FBI, if that's what they're looking to do?
Sure. I can share, my experience a little bit, and that's what I have to draw on, and then, some knowledge of others and their experience. For me, I got out of the Air Force after 5.5 years. When I was a captain, I was curious about the business world. I finagled my way into New York City and decided to move there and work in New York and get my MBA and whatnot. I was in New York when 9/11 happened, and then, like a lot of people, I felt the call to do something, go back to something greater than myself. And for me, the process was that they liked my variety of background. As Charlie mentioned, they liked my pedigree or my background from the Air Force Academy and my time served, but they also liked my experience outside of the military and the business world, and working in Manhattan and around the world in a professional services firm, and having stories to talk to about working with people in different scenarios and different contexts. So for me, it seemed like they liked the myriad of experiences that I brought to the FBI, and that's what I feel, got me in the door. And when people and young people ask me about what they should do if they want to pursue the FBI, my advice is to study what you want to study in school, go out and do what you want to do as a job, be good at it, and try to get as many different experiences as you can and make yourself as attractive on paper as possible, and put yourself out there, because you never know what they're looking for from time to time. And we're only, as an organization, we're only as strong as our variety of skill sets and experiences, and we draw on that. So the FBI is never really looking for the same type of person across the board. They're looking for, in my opinion, a great variety of skills and backgrounds to give it, our best capability.
Perfect. Dean, I might ask you to elaborate a little bit on that as well. Is there anything that you would like to add with regards to what you would tell someone that is interested in entering into the FBI, that is, newly exiting service? And if you might be able to touch on some of the specific steps that you're looking for that might be required.
Yeah, so I mentioned before the kind of unique aspect of the FBI, and I meant to say national security as well, right? So criminal and national security, and a member of the intel community. So if you think about what we do, that broad range, national security being counterintelligence and counterterrorism, cyber, we've got criminal violations that we do. The breadth of criminal violations is enormous. Being a member of the intel community, and the need that we have for people that can do, analytical work or collections or analysis or anything that goes along with that. I mean, that it's really this incredible diversity of jobs that the FBI needs, right? And so to Mike's point, really what we're looking for is high quality candidates who have sort of a mission focus, right? They want to serve their country. They want to serve something that's bigger than themselves, right? You don't come in the FBI to become wealthy. I mean, you're not chasing the dollar, right? You're chasing a purpose, and that's really to, again, defend the Constitution, defend our way of life, defend Americans, whether they're living home or abroad. We protect our communities. We work with local police. We protect the national security from foreign adversaries. We work overseas, and in places that are very austere, protecting American interests and having those relationships with counterpart nations. So it's such a divergent and diverse area across our mission set, that you can come in with any sort of background and find a place in the FBI where you can probably put it to use. One of my classmates when I went through the academy was an archaeologist, and you know what, he'd probably be great on evidence recovery teams, evidence response teams. So I mean, there's things like that no matter what your background, if you come in the FBI, I mean, I've always said this to people, if you come in the FBI, if you can't find a job that you like in the FBI, then you just don't like federal law enforcement, because we do so much. We do everything from A to Z that you're going to find in the FBI. And so really, whatever your background is, do it well, find something you like, find something you're passionate about, and come in and bring the energy and the excitement, the creativity, all the things that have made you successful in your career in the Air Force. Bring that to the FBI and you will succeed. There's a great career for you.
Perfect. Charlie, this question is for you. How do you think the Air Force Academy in particular and the prep school helped you be successful?
Okay, and you were cutting up just a little bit for me again, Liz, but I understand the question to be how the prep school and Air Force Academy helps me get into the FBI. Is that the question?
Correct. How did your time at the Air Force Academy and the prep school help you to be successful in your career field now?
Well, first and foremost, I think the discipline that we all learn when we attend, the academies and the prep schools. I can recall specifically being at Quantico, and there's several military professionals that go into the FBI career field, and several of my classmates had a military background. But there's also several that have no experience with military or that type of an academy situation. And I just recall thinking Quantico is easy compared to the 4 years I just spent at USAFA. And so the preparation is just natural for us. It's hard to even quantify how much it prepared you for those steps of getting into the FBI, and then beyond that, the relationship building, the types of relationships that you had while you're at the academy and with other services throughout your service in the Air Force is instrumental in accomplishing the mission of the FBI. And I don't think Dean nor Mike would disagree with me that interviewing techniques and your ability to talk to people is what gets this mission done for the most part. And so having those abilities and skills from both prep school, academy, and even your Air Force career just help you be a very successful agent. And I'd like to actually add to what Mike and Dean said. We have other positions besides agent, and it's okay to not be an agent. And I don't want to get too off track, but I know that through my recruitments and some of the other work I've done with the FBI, everybody thinks of agent, much like when you join the Air Force, you think you're going to be a pilot. The agent's kind of the equivalent of the pilot in the FBI, but it takes the entire support structure to make those pilots fly and make agents get their job accomplished. So the responsibility to carry a gun and potentially take a life at some point isn't for everybody, but there's still jobs for you, like Dean pointed out. So the academy, the prep school experience, and the Air Force career prepares you. I can't even, like I said, quantify it immensely though for this career field, and it's why the FBI often recruits from academies specifically, but even military experience in general.
That was an excellent answer. Thank you very much for elaborating. Mike, I'm actually going to turn it over to you for the next question. My question is with regards to law enforcement, and this is a question that actually came in from some recently transitioned Air Force members, grads. What is the difference between the FBI and regular law enforcement? Why would someone be enticed to join the FBI over a typical position within a local community police department?
Okay. There are great opportunities to serve in law enforcement and serve the greater good in local communities and counties. I think it's just a question of scope. The FBI, we have jurisdiction in continental U.S., our overseas territories, and U.S. facilities overseas. So to me, it's a matter of scope. The FBI is the 800-pound gorilla in terms of resources, and the ability to bring those resources to an investigation or to a program or to a problem is amazing when it happens, and it happens more than I think people understand. So for the FBI, for example, in Denver, I was asked to deal with something in Wyoming that Wyoming thought was a little larger than they wanted to handle themselves. And I was able to look at the problem and reach back and bring resources from the East Coast throughout the FBI to build a custom solution, which included a lot of things and toys and capabilities that local departments just don't have the budget for on their own. And the ability to do that and solve a problem for a local jurisdiction is very rewarding, and shows them what's possible when merely raise their hand and ask for a little assistance. So for me, the ability to do this FBI law enforcement work in New York City, and then based out of Virginia, to take it on the road to just about every dusty theater in the world during the global war on terror, and then continue that in Denver and cover in Colorado and Wyoming. You have the ability to go pretty much anywhere you want to go and get into aspects of law enforcement and intelligence work as deep as you want to go. And I just don't think that, the same type of opportunities exist in smaller departments or sheriff departments. So for me, I wanted to go where I could have the most agility and the most options and the most resources. And it's been a great ride for 18 years.
Fantastic. Dean, I'm actually going to ask you to elaborate a bit more on this question as well. I think, each of
Yeah.
you brings a different perspective to the panel today in terms of your own experiences or the disciplines that you're working in. So do you have anything to add with regards to those differences?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we have different forms of or levels of government in the states, right? So you've got city and county and state and federal, and each one has its own jurisdiction. And the jurisdiction is over the geographic area as well as the crimes. For example, like murder might be a state crime, but not an FBI crime unless it's on federal land. I always think of the local police or the state police. These guys tend to be the front line first responders. I mean, when something hits the fan, when it's an active shooter, it's whatever the issue might be, it's your local PD that's going to be there first. They're just there. They're out. They're on the streets. They are the front line. They're in the trenches every day. They're in their jurisdiction, whatever their jurisdiction is, whether it's city, county, state, right? That's where they are. That's where they live. That's where they stay. That's where they work. To Mike's point, FBI, we are not the instantaneous first responders. We are part of that community, and we will show up to events, but we're usually not the first one on the scene, right? It's usually that local PD guy that's the first one on the scene. We tend to be longer term, bigger scale, bigger scope. We take investigations. We run them, extensively. We rather than take, the local drug dealer off the street, we want to take out the drug dealer and his entire group and his chain of, supply chain, right? I mean, we try to do these larger scale investigations to have very large impact kind of thing. When we do activities like SWAT team, and Mike used to be our SWAT team leader in Denver, so he's very tuned to this. We control the situation, right? We're not necessarily just responding immediately. We're taking the time to say, we're going to hit a certain location at a certain time on a certain date. You know what I mean? We're doing that type of stuff. So we're very, very much about sort of that, I don't want to say slow, but it's a very methodical approach about how we're going to do things to make sure we have the response capability, certainly that we help with our locals, our local PDs, we do that kind of stuff, but we're very longer term, sort of methodical looking.
Excellent.
If that helps.
Absolutely. And that does lead me to another question with regards to your mentioning the types of individuals that are gravitating with regards to things like SWAT and aspects of that mechanism. So thank you for just a moment. Would you? Is that any better?
You're
Pardon me?
breaking up. Yeah.
All right, there we go. Mike, would you mind elaborating on the mission of SWAT and how that function actually works for the FBI?
Sure. Well, the FBI is unique, again, in its scope in that we have 56 field offices, and each field office has a tactical team, a SWAT team. The FBI SWAT teams are not full-time tactical teams. That is that generally all members of the team, except for the team leader, are agents first that are assigned to squads and doing investigative work, and it's a ancillary duty. It's an extra duty that they opt into and are selected for to serve in a tactical team. So you take 56 field offices, and obviously the New York office SWAT team with 56 team members is much bigger than the Jackson, Mississippi team, which might have 15. So they vary in size, but for the FBI, it's a unique capability in that in total we have nearly 1,200 tactical members that all have the same uniform, the same equipment, the same tactics, the same communication gear, and we can cover the United States pretty well in dealing with issues. As Dean pointed out, we're not the we don't operate like firemen. We're not sitting on our bags 24 hours, 7 days a week, waiting for the klaxon to go off and the first one's on scene. But our bread and butter is more the deliberate operations to support the case agents in their investigations. So, for example, most field offices have a gang focused investigative team, and when they spend 12, 18 months investigating a gang in Denver or in Houston or wherever, and they're ready to take it down, they're ready to get warrants and serve warrants. When those operations meet certain threat and risk levels, either from the individuals, the subjects, prior criminal history, the confirmed presence of firearms or automatic weapons or counter surveillance capability, or a number of things. But when it reaches a certain risk threshold, then that warrant service does not get handled by the case squad. It gets sent to the SWAT team for the SWAT team to handle. So, we have a sort of a constant flow of issues and investigative events that are slow cooking and at different stages. And then as things come mature and, we'll be asked to go and serve warrants, search warrants or arrest warrants or both on subjects. We do get tied up into exigent sort of evolving situations from time to time. Just yesterday, I was out with the Denver crew because a murder fugitive out of LA was active and located in the Denver metropolitan area. And so we got called out to go and serve that arrest warrant. And that was not an operation that was planned over 3 or 4 days. That was planned in about 90 minutes. So it's a mix. The FBI tactical program is fairly professionalized, in that it's a pretty rigorous selection process. And then once you're on a team, there's plenty of opportunity for continued education with adding to your skill sets and refining and taking your skills to a next level. So it can be a very rewarding program for those that think that kind of thing is interesting. But it certainly puts you out on the pointy end of the FBI, where the rubber meets the road, and we'll give you lots of stories to talk about on the front porch swing when you're an old man or woman having your gin and tonic as the sun sets. And for me, my career path, I value experience, and I like stories, and I like being out there doing those types of things. And so for me, it's been a fun ride.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Next question I will turn over to Charlie, and it also comes from my person who is currently transitioning to what is a typical day in the life of an agent? We hope you'll help us bust some stereotypes with regards to that. Are you able to hear me?
Okay, it was cutting out again, but I believe the question is, can you describe a typical day in the life of an agent? And I'll piggyback a little off of what Dean said, that you can do anything in the Bureau. So I know the answer you love, Liz, is it depends, right? Most of my career has been in resident agencies, which are basically satellite offices of a headquarters. So right now I'm in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is part of Denver Big Division. So in preparation for kind of what the day in life is in those resident agencies, most of the agents work a variety of criminal activity. You could work a bank robbery today and a cybercrime tomorrow and a child abduction the next day, and it can just change because there's fewer resources, fewer agents in those locations, and so you respond to the federal crime at hand. In a bigger city, and both Dean and Mike can speak more to bigger cities, but you may be on a squad that works one violation for the FBI, and you can work many years, even a career working that one violation. So you may be an expert in your field, where in a resident agency, oftentimes you're kind of a jack of all trade, master of none. Regardless of that, the typical day is the beauty of our job is the liberty that we have to do it the way that we feel is the right way to do it. I mean, obviously there's supervision. Mike and I and Dean are all in the supervisory and management positions, but for the most part in the FBI, those case agents work the case the way they feel is best to solve the crime and provide justice to victims, protect our Constitution. That typically is show up to work, depending on what your investigation that you're working. Most of the time that will involve interviews. That's coordination with state, local, federal, and also tribal communities, depending on where you're at. We have reservations in Wyoming that we work with. You coordinate your findings with the United States Attorney's Office so that we can get that pushed through prosecution. And then preparation for grand jury indictments, for complaints, all the charging instruments to basically put, quote, the bad guy in jail. And again, I think what I want to hinge on is you're at liberty to get those answers, to solve those cases, to get that justice on your own. And I think that's the beauty and why a lot of us are attracted to this career field, is the independence that take the skills, the knowledge, the capabilities, the resources, the equipment, the SWAT teams, the ERTs, whatever it takes to solve that and provide that justice each and every day of our career.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Again, I'm hoping to hear having a little bit of my next question is actually back to you, and it backs on a question we had earlier with regards to the differences between law enforcement itself with community police, the community police force, and the FBI. Would you mind talking about some of the benefits with regards to retirement and how that specifically can also include your military time and service?
I missed the very first part. Liz, was that for me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sure. So the federal employee retirement system, FERS, is what we fall under in the FBI. So when you come in to the FBI, you will start as a civilian employee. Any active duty military time that you had will count from the beginning in terms of determining leave, like how much leave you earn right off the bat, but it won't count necessarily towards your retirement unless you buy that time in. The way the FERS system works for agents is the first 20 years that you serve as an agent, you earn 1.7% per year, so it turns out to be 34% after 20 years. You can retire immediately. The 34% is all pay. So it's your base pay, your locality pay, your availability pay, all of that is counted. So it isn't just a base pay like the military side. So the 34% actually, if you're earning 120, 130 with all your, whatever your pay extra is, it will be all of that, not just the base part. So you have to be at least 50 and have 20 years or 25 years at any age. So if you come in at 28, you would have to work until 50 until you're eligible, right? You'd have your 22 years. Very few people come in their early 20s. I mean, it's possible. We had one in my class who was in his early 20s, but the average age for people when they come in the bureau is around 30 to 33. So it's by the time they've put in their 20 years, they're eligible to retire. You draw your retirement annuity immediately, and then we have a mandatory retirement at 57. At 57, you leave unless you get you can ask for an extension at a year at a time, basically. So you could technically push it all the way out to 60 if you really wanted to. Very few people do that. Some people will extend a year or two. but I haven't known many that have gone out to 60 as an agent. The first 20 years, as I've said, was 34%. Every year after that is 1%. So all of your military time, if you buy it in, would be equal to basically 1% for every year you had. That includes academy time as well. The way that accounting is done is basically they add up all your active duty time to include your academy time, and then it's based upon, it's like 3% or 4%, whatever, like a very small percentage of what you were paid, not your total pay, but your base pay. So for me, when I came in, now granted I was graduated many years ago, back when cadets earned a couple $100s a month, but when I came in, my total time of 10 years active duty, 10 and a half years active duty, and 4 years at the academy was 14 and a half years of active time that I could buy in. And the cost for me at the time was about $11,000. So it wasn't horrendous. And then the way they do it is they will give you, I believe it was 3 years, interest free. And then if you have it all paid off by 3 years, then you accrue no interest on that. And then if whatever carries on beyond 3 years, they would actually charge a nominal interest, whatever the kind of going rate was at the time. So the best way to do that, if you're going to come into the bureau and you want to pay whatever it is, 15,000, whatever your number is, and buy your time in, I always recommend to people that they set up an allotment. Start with $50 a paycheck or $100 a paycheck. Just chunk it away for a bit. As you get promoted, put a little bit more in, and as you approach the 3-year mark, you will have whittled the number down, pretty well, and then just pay it off by 3 years, right? And then you pay no interest at all. I will tell you, it's the best investment you'll ever make. As an agent with 20 years, you're going to earn at least $100,000. And so if you use that as a baseline, $100,000, if you bought 10% in, your annual annuity off of that's going to be $10,000 a year. And your pay, let's say you had to pay 10 grand for that. What investment are you going to have where you put $10,000 now down and 20 years later draw an annual annuity forever for $10,000? You're just not going to find it. So it's the best investment you'll ever make as a military person coming into the bureau, and I always encourage people to do that.
Thank you, Dean. Gentlemen, are you able to hear me clearly now? Yes. Okay. Great. I really appreciate Dean actually visited the academy last year and gave a great presentation to us talking about that. So as how he approached the piece was really following very well. My next question is for Mike, if Mike can hear me okay. Would you mind talking through the specific steps that you took with regard to applying to the FBI? There are a lot of preconceived notions about not ever hearing back, or that it takes a very lengthy amount of time. Would you mind elaborating on that? This is from Mike. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Can you guys hear her, or is it just me? I don't know if it's my phone reception, but I got one word out of all that was elaborate.
No.
All right. Mike, can you hear me now? Of course, or we'll have issues on the line.
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. The question was with regards to steps to applying, and if you'd be able to elaborate on the specific steps with regards to how long it took, or the idea is out there that you might not ever hear back or have any conclusive next steps with regards to your application.
Sure. I'll draw, to my process 19 years ago, and I'm not involved with the current process, but I think it's generally the same. The first step is to go to FBI.gov, and there you can find information about the FBI and the different career paths, and whichever one you find appealing. Pretty sure the first step is to click a button there and say that you're interested. Based on your geography, that interest will get filtered to a recruiter in the closest field office to where you are, and they'll begin to, look at your submission, your information, whatever you put in. When I did it, I think you submitted a resume or some kind of background, and that was the first bit that the applicant coordinators, as they're called, got to see of Mike Bergner and what I might have to offer. So that's the same first step for everybody. I think even if you show up to the field office in a dressed in a sharp suit and a tie like Charlie's got on, bang on the door and say that my dream is to become an FBI agent, they're going to tell you the same thing. Go to FBI.gov and follow the steps there. So that's the common intake funnel. And from there, some magic is done. And if you look competitive on paper and you look promising, then believe, the next step is that you're invited to a location to take a collection of tests. And, these are not like your SAT or ACT. You can't really study for them. And you're going to take a battery of tests that just kind of show how your neurons in your brain fire and how you reason and how you judge things, and just some qualitative data. If an individual scores well on those and passes a threshold, then I believe the next step is an interview. It's called a phase 2, and phase 2 interviews are done by field agents for the agent positions. I'm not quite sure how it works for the intel analyst. Maybe Dean or Charlie know more about that, but I believe it's it's a sit down with a group of employees from the FBI that do your career field, and it's an interview. So an in-person, and I believe they're still doing them in person even nowadays because of the importance of meeting somebody face to face. If candidate does well in the interview and passes that threshold, then you get into, what I consider the technicalities. They're gonna have you, take a physical to make sure that your body and that your machine functions well enough to be a federal agent. And if you pass the physical, then you move on to a fitness test, I believe. And then, the final, if you pass those things, then the final stage is a polygraph, the dreaded polygraph where you sit and someone asks you questions. And it's really not to delve into your past histories and whether you like unicorns and really never told anybody that you love purple unicorns and you're embarrassed about that, but to make sure that the information you provided in your background is accurate, that you're not trying to hide anything, to be a mark on whether you're a trustworthy individual and honest, and that you're pursuing this of your own interest and not because the Chinese put you up for it or someone's trying to get someone on the inside to be a mole. So it's the final stopgap to see if you're the genuine article and you're there for the right reasons. So that's the general process. Depending upon how colorful your background is or how many places you lived and complexity of the background investigation and whatnot, it could take a year, it could take 2 years. It kind of just depends on how long it takes to unravel, the layers of the onion and make sure that the FBI knows exactly what they're hiring and is comfortable with it. So for me, it took, I think it was 12 months or so, just because I'm a really boring guy and didn't have anything interesting for them to investigate. So I don't know if Charlie or Dean have any insights into any current differences from that, but it's a very methodical step process where you start at step 1 and work your way through step 6, and then if you pass them all, the next thing you know, they offer you a spot in a new agent class.
I would just add real quick, my own experience. Mine took about 20 months with the background investigation because I had traveled a lot for the Air Force already, and maybe I think that was a bigger problem. I don't know, but mine took 20 months. I share the story though that I had a guy in my class who had applied 3 or 4 times and had been denied through the course of, I think, 5 years, over 5 years. He graduated in my class, and you know what he was called at the end? Special agent, just like everyone else. So keep on trying. If you get declined the first time, and for some reason, or you don't pass the PT test or something like that, it's really what you want to do, apply again. It doesn't mean the first time you get denied that it's all over.
Liz, real quickly, if anyone has any questions about the process and the phases, FBIjobs.gov explains it all for all career fields.
Perfect. Thank you. Actually, the next question to you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. But would you mind talking about some of the behavior or characteristics that the FBI looks for during the application process?
Okay, my understanding is some of the behavioral characteristics the FBI looks for in its agents. And I will say probably more personality traits than behavioral characteristics, because the things the FBI are looking for, you can't hide and you can't pretend. But much like the Air Force Academy, I mean, we will not lie, steal, or cheat among us, or tolerate anyone that does. Fidelity, bravery, integrity. That's the FBI motto. Right in line with what all of our service academies value, the same characteristics, the same traits of these folks. And that's why the transition from a military academy or the military in general into FBI or federal law enforcement is a much simpler transition. Again, discipline is a huge factor in everything we do. We have to be able to trust that our employees are doing what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how they're supposed to do it. As I mentioned before, with the lack of oversight for a good reason, and with the ability to be at liberty to conduct your investigations and your work as needed, the FBI needs to be able to trust that person for 20 plus years, as Dean mentioned. So I think the things the FBI look for are directly in line with service academy experiences, and the transitions very easy for those types of folks, including the 3 of us on the panel today. And I think that's kind of why the FBI is very interested in anybody with a similar background when they apply for our positions.
Perfect. Thank you. Last question, before we close out, because I think we've covered the gamut with regards to the submitted questions and the stereotypes that people read out there. It goes back to Dean, and really more of a final words of wisdom or insight versus a question. And Dean, hopefully you can hear me with regards to that. Do you have any other final remarks to add?
I'm sorry, Liz. All I heard was Dean in there of all the came across really jumpy.
Any final remarks, recommendations for applicants?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Look, the FBI is a great place to work. I love this organization. I know these other guys do as well. You work with tremendous people. To me, it is still like a family, like the folks I used to work with when I was in the Air Force. I loved the Air Force. I never thought I would leave, and it was only because I had this opportunity. I applied and I got in the FBI. It's the only reason I would have left the Air Force. But it's the same kind of mission focus, high quality people you get to work with on a daily basis. You're doing national security or criminal violations or whatever it may be. You're focused on something that's important to your community or to your country. You're doing something that's really valuable, right? And it's just an amazing thing to be a part of that. And to Charlie's point, the the kinds of things that you're learning at the academy, the experiences, and all military, but you know, your grit, your determination, your problem solving skills, your time management, your leadership, communications, just all these sort of things that become valuable skills that you learn in your military experience, in your academy experience. All of those will make you really really good, valuable, productive, and successful FBI employees. Whether you want to be an agent or not, I've met a lot of people in the military. We've got a large proportion of veterans in the FBI, and I'll tell you, a lot of the veterans, the former military people, do very well. They're successful at their job. I really encourage people to give it a real consideration. The kinds of people that can make it to the academy and succeed at the academy, you're going to succeed in the FBI. You're going to do very well. Yeah, that's my final thought on that.
Perfect. And that concludes our panel for today. Thank you all very much for attending and taking the time to hear the stories from our panelists with us tonight. This will conclude our virtual event, and I hope that everyone has a great evening. Thank you.